Hey, it's good to see you guys. I missed you guys yesterday. We didn't get to hang out together, but man, y'all been in good hands though. It's been a good week. I can't believe it's the last day, but it's just, it's been one of the most enjoyable weeks for me just as a disciple of Jesus, trying to learn and grow and watch God do things. And man, y'all been blessed. Like Caleb, first of all, Caleb's just so adorable. You know what I mean? He's just so cute. I mean, Caleb DeRoyan too, but Colton Bach, the bald white guy, he's just great. Like we've been friends forever. Love hearing him bring the word and share his story. And Brad last night, gosh, and well, in all the videos, but Brad, he's one of my favorite preachers in the world. Like, he always preaches the truth from the Word, and he always makes you laugh, and he always just draws you into the presence of the Spirit. I could listen to him forever. And later on this afternoon, like one of my favorite people on the planet, I know I keep saying that, but I mean it, is going to be here this afternoon for our final session. Like, here's the dude, his name is Matt. He's the kind of person where if you meet him, within 5 minutes of hanging out with him, you know he's not faking anything. He loves Jesus more than anything else in the world, and he wants you to love him too so that you can have as much joy as he does. Like, he's that kind of person. So anyway, it's been a great week, and the kingdom workers, that's the word we use to describe, like people who do what we do, people who do what you do. Y'all ready to be kingdom workers? How many of you are ready to be kingdom workers? Yeah, so you, but the thing is, you probably know this, kingdom work is hard. It's hard. It's so good. So worth it. But at least sometimes it's hard. I think if you probably ask about 10 different kingdom workers, say, what's the hardest thing for you about working for the Lord, about doing kingdom work, about using your gifts and talents and abilities and story in order to move his mission forward? Well, what's the hardest thing for you about kingdom work? If you ask 10 kingdom workers this question, I think you'd probably get 7 or 8 different answers. If you ask me, you know what it is? If you ask me, the hardest thing about this is it's the pain of the world combined with her refusal to accept the cure. That's the hardest thing for me. Like, we've already talked about the pain of the world. We're aware of the pain of the world. We know about this, but it's also like, man, like we have what you need, and then it's rejected. It's pushed away. It's just hard. It's just like, well, what do we do after you say no to the thing that you need? And it's like, I don't know, I feel like every week or so I hear another story about somebody pushing the gospel away. A teacher in New Jersey gets suspended because he loaned a Bible to a student who asked if he could borrow it. A football coach in Seattle gets put on leave because he prayed publicly after a game. A fire chief gets fired in Atlanta because he self-published a book defending traditional Christian teaching. A Marine, she gets court-martialed and discharged because she refuses to take a Bible verse down from her own private workstation. And it's just like what? And I want to keep these things in perspective. Like, the things that we face don't compare to the things that Christians in other parts of the world often face and that Christians in other centuries face. And it's not just in the past, too. It really is right now. I don't know if you know this, but more Christians were killed for their faith last century than the previous 19 centuries combined. And so far in the 21st century, we're keeping pace. I don't know where things are headed in our country. We're not there right now, so I want to keep things in perspective, but it's difficult when it's like we're watching a dying world just gasping for air, and they won't accept the oxygen of the gospel. But like I said, that's just me. If you ask somebody else the question, they'll probably give you a different answer. What is the hardest thing about kingdom work for you? And the lesson in this is that you won't be able to predict the ways in which this journey will be tough for you, but you can know for sure that some phases of this road will make taking one more step more difficult than others. You can know it's going to be hard. Last night was powerful, and I especially love when God works in ways that none of us fully understand. Here's what I mean. Y'all wrote a bunch of names. I don't even know who these people are. How many of you wrote a name last night of somebody who you're going to try to reach? That's awesome, and do it. But have you thought about how hard it's going to be? You probably have. I'm probably not telling you something you don't know. Like, how hard is it going to be to reach Amanda? How hard is it going to be to reach Steve? Like, what if it doesn't go very well? I'm sure you've thought about this, like, what if it doesn't go very well? What if you wait for the perfect moment? Or what if you think, like, man, I know this is going to be awkward, but we've got enough relational capital that I can go ahead and take the risk and talk about the gospel. What if you give it a shot, and then it's like, yeah, the conversation kind of goes well, but then you're stonewalled, and they just cut you out completely. Well, have you thought about what it's going to be like to reach Cynthia? Have you really sort of like worked your way emotionally and spiritually through the challenges in stepping out in faith to start this conversation with Marquise? Like, what's it going to be like? What if it goes well at first? What if there's some openness to this, and then there's some conversation that seems to be moving forward, and there's some interest in the gospel, and you're amped up because this is what you signed up for. Like, this is why you wrote their name on the board. This is why you took the risk and sent them a text or started a conversation about these things, and it's moving forward, and then something just comes in and gets in the way. What if they have a tragedy in their life that you don't know how to explain, and so they bounce? I'm done. What if some relationship or who knows what it could be, but what if something comes in and cuts you off? Or what if when you're reaching out to these people that you love so much, to Jacob, to Rachel, like what if when you're reaching out to these people who you've decided to step out in faith, like what if it works and they believe in Jesus and they're thriving and it's wonderful, but you feel empty inside? And you're looking at this going like, wow, what's going, like, how is it? I thought I was supposed to feel more joy as I stepped into this mission that God has given me. I don't know the ways in which it will be difficult, but I know that there will be ways in which it is difficult. Today is a call to mission. It's day 5. This is it. Today is a call to kingdom work. But before you even consider signing up, you need to know what you're getting into. That's where we find Elisha in the chapter that we're looking at today. It's in 2 Kings. If you have your Bibles, open them to 2 Kings chapter 2. I want to read the text for you. We're going to be talking about this passage today twice. Today we'll talk about the first part this morning, and then later on today we'll talk about the second part. We're just looking together at the first 10 verses of this. And let's lock in. And picking up right where Brad left off for us in the video, here's what happens in 2 Kings chapter 2. It says, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha, I know it gets confusing, but you guys can track, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, stay here. The Lord has sent me to Bethel. But Elisha said, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So they went down to Bethel. The company of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elisha and asked, do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today? Yeah, I know, Elisha replied. So be quiet. Then Elijah said to him, stay here, Elisha. The Lord has sent me to Jericho. And he replied, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So they went to Jericho. The company of the prophets at Jericho went up to Elisha and asked him, do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today? Yeah, I know, he replied, so be quiet. Then Elijah said to him, stay here, the Lord has sent me to the Jordan, that's a river. And he replied, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So the two of them walked on. 50 men from the company of the prophets went and stood at a distance, facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. The water divided to the right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you? Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. Elisha replied. You have asked a difficult thing, Elijah said, yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise, it will not. Can I call you Elisha? Can I call you Elisha? Is that okay? Like we've talked all week about how the different elements in this story, the real things that actually took place, and yet they also symbolize certain aspects of our own lives. So bread symbolizes God's provision of life, and Jezebel symbolizes the evil that is threatening to destroy us, and caves symbolize the paralysis of despair, this place where I'm hiding because I don't know how to engage God. Well, Elisha symbolizes you today, right now. Elisha's like, I'm ready to take the baton, and Elijah's like, are you? So Elijah takes Elisha on a walk. I suppose we're not surprised by now that it's a weird walk. I mean, it's sort of like what we've come to expect from this story. where weird is normal and normal would be weird. But it is an odd walk. So let's ask the question, what's going on here in this sort of final walk together where Elijah is leading Elisha to these various places, and each time he tells him, hey, why don't you stay here and not come with me? There's a couple of things that I think are going on. 3, in fact. We're going to talk through each of them. The first thing that's going on is Elijah is checking on his other students. He's a prophet, but he also, trains other prophets. I don't know if you noticed this, you probably did in the story. Everywhere they go, some prophets come out to meet them. It says the company of prophets came out to meet them. And the idea here is that Elijah had these little schools of prophecy kind of scattered throughout the land, and he would go, teach them, here's how to listen to the Lord, and here's how to fearlessly proclaim what he says, even if you're afraid of the consequences. No doubt he talked about a lot of these things, and so part of what Elijah's doing, since he knows he's about to be done, and they know he's about to be done, they are all prophets after all, I guess it kind of helps when you all know what's coming, but he's checking in on them before he takes off. So make sure you guys are good. That's the first thing. Second thing he's doing is Elijah is making sure that Elisha knows the story. The one that he's stepping into. The story of people who do business with God. The story of people who follow God's leading, who listen to his voice, who do his work. This is a walk down memory lane. Some of you may have had the blessing of being taught the Bible well from a young age, and so maybe you recognize these places. A lot of us don't necessarily know the places and the things that happen there, so you need to understand a little bit about what's going on with some of these different places. The first place they go is called Bethel. Everybody say Bethel. It means house of God. It's a unique place in Israel's history, and one of the most important things that ever happened there was there's this man named Jacob who was a follower of God long time before Elijah and Elisha. Maybe you've heard of Jacob in the Bible. And he's at Bethel, and he goes to sleep, and he has this dream, and in the dream there's this ladder that's stretching from earth to heaven, and there's these angels that are ascending and descending back and forth, and he wakes up and he realizes, whoa, that was more than a dream. And what he says is, this is a place where God has been all along, and so he names it Bethel. This is the house of God. This is where God reveals his presence. And then he goes from Bethel off to Jericho, another place that has a pretty important significance in the story of God's people. Jericho, say Jericho. Great place. You didn't say Jericho. Say Jericho. Thank you. Just humor me. You know what I mean? Jericho's an interesting place. I've been there before. It's very hot and deserty. It claims to be the oldest city in the world. Anyway, maybe you've heard of Jericho. Because earlier in Israel's history, there was a young leader named Joshua who had taken over God's people after Moses died, and he was leading the people. It was kind of the very end of their wilderness journey. They'd been in the wilderness for 40 years, and they'd been promised that they were going to live in this wonderful land, and the only thing standing between them and this wonderful land was a lot of people who were really scary. And so the first thing they do when they cross into the promised land is they come to the city of Jericho. And they're going to have to defeat the city of Jericho if they're going to experience the freedom that God has for them. And so they're ready. Like there's these young strapping men, and they're trained, and they're ready for war. And they're like, let's go. And God says, here's what I want you to do. First day, I want you to just march around the city. And they're like, you want us to what? Well, I want you to take a walk around the city. Okay, so they walked around the city. Second day, I want you to walk around the city again. What? Like, our swords are ready. Nope, leave your swords in the holsters. Just walk around the city. Again? Yeah, walk around the city. Over and over and over again. 6 days, seventh day, walk around the city. And this time when you walk around the city, I want you to walk around 7 times, and I want you to blow your trumpets. And then when you blow your trumpets, everybody down in the city is going to freak out and go crazy, and they're going to start destroying themselves. And then you just go clean up after the act. You just go finish things up, right? You just go take care of the last little problems. Because God, he's like, I want you to know that I'm the one who fights these battles. And that if you're going to be with me, you're going to do some strange things because I am the most powerful person involved in this mission. Jericho's the place where God showed his power to Joshua and taught him that life with God means you do some things that don't always make sense on the surface. And then they go from Jericho to the Jordan River. I won't make you say Jordan because I don't think you like repeating me, but they go to the Jordan River. And it's this river where they're standing there at the river. It's actually right around the same time of the Jericho thing. And it is the barrier that is standing between them and the promised land. And they get there. You can read about this in other parts of the Bible, the book of Joshua. And they stand at the edge of the river, and it's flowing. And, they know that God has done this before. He parts waters and stuff. But the last time it happened, he parted the waters, and then the people of Israel walked through. He tells Joshua and his leaders, here's how this is going to work. You're going to take a step into the water, and then I'm going to part it in half, and you can go across. And Joshua and the leaders probably were like, what did you say? You want us to step into the river before you part this and dry it up. Yeah, I want you to step into the river. with no proof that I'm actually going to do what I said, except for the fact that I'm telling you that I'm going to do what I said. And so they're like, all right, okay, we'll do it. And so they step into the river and the waters parts. Jordan is the place where God clears a path for the next chapter. So Elijah is taking Elisha down memory lane because he wants him to understand the story. But here's the thing, like you got to know something about these events is that it's not all good, right? Like sure, Jacob got to see God's presence, but do you know why he was in Bethel? Because he was running from his older brother who wanted to kill him. At Jericho, Joshua got to be victorious, but he looked like an idiot to everybody who was watching as he just marched around the city. And at the Jordan River, the leaders of Israel, sure, they got to experience God's power, but they had to take the first step before the water stopped. And I think part of what Elijah is saying to Elisha is, if you understand the story, like you know how the next steps are going to go. It's going to be excruciatingly hard and confusing and full of conflict. Most of it will only make sense in hindsight. You're going to have to relearn the meaning of the word faith over and over and over. And that actually takes us to, I think this is the most important piece, the third thing that Elijah is doing on this strange walk. Elijah is giving Elisha a way out. Did you notice what he tells him to do? Stay. I don't think it's so much of a command as it is like a permission slip. You can stay. You can chill with these guys if you want. I got some more work to do, but you can just stay back if you want. And each time Elisha says, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So they went. God's mission is going to continue. But you have the choice of whether you stay or whether you go. God's mission is going to continue. But whether and to what extent you are a part of it, that's up to you. What are you going to do? This is a real question. What are you going to do? This is one of only 2 times in the Bible that I'm aware of that the call on a prophet's life is voluntary. Most of the time when God calls a prophet, he's like, I want you, and this is what I want you to say, and you don't really have much of a choice in the matter. But twice in Scripture, God gives the prophet an option. Once is a man named Isaiah. Maybe you've heard of him. God is talking to Isaiah, and he says, listen, we have a need for somebody to go and preach to a bunch of people who don't want to hear it. Who will go for us? Who's in? And Isaiah says, here I am, send me. So Isaiah volunteers, and the only other time that a prophet volunteers for the mission is Elisha. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes. No. Are you sure? Yes. Are you sure? Because this is a big baton to carry. These are big shoes to fill. You know, you heard earlier this week about a young man, Jay Smothers, who is from Norton, Kansas, whose church is at this conference, who passed away just a couple of weeks ago. Jace was, I had the opportunity to teach Jace. I met Jace here on this campus at a COI conference a couple years ago, and I had a chance to teach him one class at Ozark, a freshman Acts class, and he sat in there, and he was just, I don't know if you saw the picture. He's a big kid. We got a picture. Let me show you another picture of Jace. This is a picture of him at the creek at Ozark, where he loved to go and pray. Big kid, probably like 6'3", like he's just big, large, like in charge, and everything about Jace was big. He had this big laugh. It would like, after he'd laugh for a while, first you'd laugh with him, and then he'd still be laughing, and you'd stop, and you'd be like, are you okay, man? It's like all sorts of sounds would come out. He had big shoes, like size 17. You ever seen size 17 shoes? It's huge, man. And he had a big heart to bring other people to Jesus. He actually had a tattoo on his arm. It's the Greek word euangelion, super big on that big old forearm of his. And it's the word for gospel. Matter of fact, let me show you one more picture. This is his dad and a couple of his siblings. They got the same tattoo. He's got a bunch of siblings. Mama's getting it. The others are getting it as well. It's the word euangelion. And it's like you look at that and you're like, well, what does that mean? It's some other script. And he said, I didn't know this. I was talking to his dad earlier this week. And he said, the reason why Jace got that tattoo was it was like very obvious. And also few people can understand it. And so he thought, maybe, I don't know, like maybe somebody would say, hey, what does that mean? And he would be able to say, well, it's the word for good news. And if they expressed any interest, well, what do you mean good news? Then that would give him an opportunity to share the gospel. That's how Jace thought. He was a person who was committed to reaching other people for Jesus. That was his story. Remember just last week in Norton at the funeral, get the local newspaper headlined by a story about Jace Smothers. And right underneath the picture was this caption about Jace, who was, and I'm not even kidding you, it was in there, it was a kingdom worker who wanted to bring other people to Jesus. That's how he will be remembered. That's who he was. Yeah. You want to know something else? His mom and his daddy would want this to be known. It's something else I love about Jay. So in this very room that you're in, a couple years ago, he's in the room. He's accepted Jesus. He's working on his family. He's working on his friends. He actually baptized his own dad in the last year, which is crazy. He's working on his friends. A couple years ago, he's in this room. And, this year, whenever you're deciding to commit yourself to Jesus, you pull the railroad switch. And it's our express. We always have a physical expression so that you could do something tangible to express what's going on in your heart. And I think this year it was like an SOS machine. So you'd go up and you'd hit the button, and it would send up this SOS distress signal. Hey, I need to be saved, Jesus, and I'm here to let you save me. And he was already saved, but he was with a friend who he'd been working on for a while, and the friend didn't believe in Jesus, and so Jason was trying to give him room, but also trying to share the gospel with this kid. Jason was very imperfect, but he loved the gospel, and he was trying to share the gospel with this kid, and they're sitting by each other, and then one night, sure enough, his friend looks at him, and he says, man, I think I'm ready. And Jay says, okay, no pressure, but if you are ready to walk up there, I will walk up there with you. And the kid said, yeah, will you come? And so Jace got up out of his seat, and he walked down these actual aisles, with his buddy, and he stood with his arm around his shoulder while the kid hit the button and said, Jesus, I want you to save me. That's his story. That's kingdom work. And again, literally and metaphorically, these are big shoes to fill. We don't have very long to do this. Like in the large scheme of things, every chapter in this story is short. There will come a time when my time is up. There will come a time when Matt's time is up, when Caleb's time is up, when Brad's time is up, when Katie's time is up. Like our time will be up. Elijah's time was up, and Elisha was in, and Elijah could see it. So he asked him a very important question. He said, I realize, you're still in. I've tried to get you to just give it up, but you won't give it up. You're still in. And so he asked him a question. Okay, tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you? I wonder what I would ask for in that moment. What would you ask for? Put yourself in this story. This great prophet who's seen some crazy stuff says, hey, what can I do for you? I don't know. Can you give me some advice? Maybe can you give me a letter of recommendation so that people kind of have some physical proof that, we're actually having this moment right here? Maybe some more time before you leave. He didn't ask for any of those things. He says, let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. And this doesn't mean I want twice as much as what you have. It's actually legal language at the time for inheritance rights. To inherit a double portion would be you'd get the what a firstborn son would get. You would get the same amount that the father had. And so what he's saying is, all I want is whatever you have. All I want is to pick up where you left off. All I want is that whatever power of God is operating in you, may the same operate in me. Same story next chapter. Same song next verse. And 1,000 years later, Jesus, after completing his ministry, was about to walk away from his disciples. He was about to leave. He was about to ascend back up to be with the Father. He was about to exit the world stage in a way that Elijah's exit actually points forward to. Elijah is a preview of Jesus, and Jesus is about to leave, and he says to his disciples, y'all don't need to worry about me leaving because you're going to receive power when my spirit comes on you. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. I think my favorite thing about this big kid, Jay Smothers, the thing I hope you remember, is not just what he did. I think he actually knew where the power came from. In this class that I had Jace take, each time at the beginning of the semester, I had my freshmen write this bio paper. It's like telling me a bit about themselves. And one of the things I asked them is, how'd you come to Jesus? I'd just like to know. And I went back and looked at Jace's answer. I thought it was interesting. He says, how Jesus revealed himself to me is a long story of boundless love. I mean, I would love to give my entire testimony of how he met me there, but that is super personal to be typing. That's what he said. He said, so Jesus met me when I was at my lowest point. He told me that I should never be afraid, for he is with me, which was stated at the end of Matthew, the Great Commission. I don't know if you know the end of Matthew. I don't know if you know what he's talking about when he says the Great Commission. It's Matthew's version of the final events of Jesus' life. He's about to leave. And he says to his disciples who are not sure what to do with this, he says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. He says, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And that's usually what everybody focuses on. It's called the Great Commission. Jesus is sending us out to make disciples of anybody that we can. But I love that Jace doesn't focus on what it is that we're called to do. He focuses on the last phrase of this Great Commission that we often forget. And lo, and behold, I will be with you always to the very end of the age. The only reason you're capable of continuing the call to kingdom work is because you're not doing it alone. It's because you have the Spirit of God empowering you from the inside. This story of kingdom work will continue, and what you probably realize is that it's not so much a story as it is a script. And you are being handed this script, and there are some lines for you, and the question is, what will you do with those lines? there was once a young kid who was kind of a talkative kid, super outgoing, and he loved to, be up on stage and be funny and these things. And he came aware at the city he lived in of this public speaking class at the local community center. And so he went to his folks and said, hey, can I take this class? And they're like, man, you talk enough as it is, but whatever, sure. So he would go week after week, and they would learn different skills and, how to give a speech and how to be an actor and those different things. And at the very end of this whole thing, there was this production. There was this recital of sorts, and they had speeches and they had plays and they had sketches. And he was in one, but it was the last one, and he was by no means the star of the story. Like, he was a king, and he came out looking real good and regal until the queen came out, and she was like a foot taller than him. And he only had a couple of lines in the final scene of the last act of the very last play. Nothing major. But you wouldn't know that by looking at his father. See, after it was over, you go out in the lobby, and his father's just beaming, and somebody actually went up to him and said, what'd you think of your son's performance? And his dad smiled, and he said, I think he said his lines. Not too loud, not too soft. Not too slow, but not too fast. I think he said his lines, and he said them well. And y'all, I'm not the star of God's story, and neither are you. But when the curtain falls and the show is over, I don't really care to hear from my critics or my friends. I just want to hear from my Father. And what I hope I hear him say is, I think he said his lines. Not too loud, not too soft, not too slow, not too fast. I think he said his lines, and he said them well. And if I could leave y'all this week with one encouragement, it would be that by the power of God's Spirit, you can say your lines. Not my lines, not your friends' lines or your parents' lines or your youth minister's lines, your lines. Say them, and say them well. And then get off the stage so all the praise and all the glory and all the attention goes to the one for whom we speak and in whose name we go and by whose power we continue, our King, our Savior, our Messiah, our Lord, Jesus.